Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Therapy Book Club. We are having our discussion about the second half of The People That We Keep today. I have a little blurb that I'm going to read for everyone to make sure that we're all in the same place and know what's going on in the book. So, the next section of the book begins with April leaving with Justin to head to Florida. On the way to Florida, Justin loses access to his credit cards, and April helps out with a little bit of money that she had to pay for the hotel since Justin was not able to use his card. They make it work while they're there, staying in the abandoned home April was able to gain access to through the keypad and her playing music for tips. Justin gets upset, and then he realizes the home was not someone April knew and had permission to be at, calls his father, and leaves. April then makes her way to Asheville, North Carolina, where she meets Ethan and Robert, and the story continues from there. So I want to check back in with Heather and Stephanie. How to see how you feel about the second half of the book. What was your rating for the first half, and then how's that changed for the second half?
So I think the first half I'll go first, sorry. The first half, I think I was at like a 7.5, if I recall correctly. And then the second half, I would say it definitely increased to at least 8.5 or 9. I definitely enjoyed the second half more than the first half. It just seemed a lot more intense and like a lot more was going on, and it captured my interest quite a bit. So definitely ended probably closer to a 9.
Yeah. Heather, what about you?
Yeah, I think in the beginning I was kind of like a 7. I do think that as the book kind of picked up a little bit more, it grabbed my interest. And I would say like about an 8. And if we're including like the ending portion in this, probably about an 8.5. I do feel like I got that sense of calmness and also just like resolution within myself for April towards the ending too. So it kind of made me feel like at ease for her. I didn't feel like I'm in rescue mode. Oh my gosh, like I want to help her. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that that is one of the things that makes this book a little challenging at times, but also that makes it very real because we see this push and pull of April being in a bad situation and then starting to gain traction to be able to make her life into something that she feels good about and to gain more security. And then that falls apart, and then she'll find another place to be able to gain more security, and then that falls apart. And it's such a roller coaster up and down where you are like feeling warm and so excited for her and so hopeful for her, and then so devastated as she goes through these different events, from having to leave Ithaca and leave this like first real chosen family that she created. Then when she is on the road and you're like, oh, I really wish that this were different. And you have this little sense of hope with Justin of like, all right, like you're letting yourself be vulnerable. Let's see where this goes. And it is an utter disaster. And then moving in with Robert and what's the other guy's name?
Ethan.
Robert and Ethan. And just like, okay, this is it now. But we all know that that wasn't it either. Um, and you just feel so deeply for her and are rooting for her, but also really struck by how heavy and difficult her different experiences and traumas throughout the book are. How do y'all feel about April throughout the book?
That one's difficult. I think that's
Yeah.
why me and Stephanie too are pausing.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath there because there's so many thoughts that come to my mind immediately.
Literally like the flooding of I think just from like the observing perspective, just like watching her grow up. So I kind of just saw her as this, child kind of growing up and trying to figure it out and kind of root for her damn self in this many situations. So there were at times where I felt like, oh my gosh, like she needs to be coddled, she needs to be taken care of. And then I was like, wait, no, she can do this thing. She's got it. She's figuring it out as she goes. So
Mhm.
I think at first I wanted to like take care of like the little child that she was, but then also realizing throughout the book that I felt like, oh, she's gaining more confidence, she's figuring it out, she's getting a little bit more stability in gathering her like identity and also like self-worth. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. Like she's doing it. And I think I gained like confidence in her. So I felt a little bit more stable through I guess through like the middle and definitely in the ending of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a roller coaster. But in the beginning, I definitely felt the same way. Like, she's just a child. Somebody needs to take care of her. Somebody needs to help her. Like, somebody needs to step in here, right? And
Mhm.
then by the end of it, I was like, watching her be a little bit vulnerable with like Margot when she reaches back out to her, but when with her dad passing, and just releasing a little bit more, like unburdening herself with Ethan and like feeling like she could just release some of that. I felt so proud of her, and I just really felt proud like through the end of the book, and it was like a different feeling than in the beginning for sure.
Yeah.
Just
I
allowing
think,
herself to just give a little bit was just like, oh, there you go, like yes, it
yeah.
was just so rewarding and sweet.
Yeah, I think we get to see so much of her like logistical resilience at the beginning of the story, where she is in the trailer just figuring things out and then moving to a new city and figuring things out and going on her kind of cross country music tour and really starting to make more relationships with people, even though they're more shallow than some of the relationships she made in Ithaca.
Mhm.
But she is not just logistically figuring it out, but really like starting to make these different connections where she does have a sense of home in a lot of different places and is able to be more resilient both in logistics and in relationships. And then I love that's part of why I love the second half of the book because we get to not just see her grow in her like physical environment resilience, but in her emotional resilience and in her vulnerability and being able to move from this place of just survival to more fully becoming the person that she is and allowing herself um, to be authentic and open and to admit that she wants and needs people in her life.
Mhm. And with every incident that happened, it was like she grew from each one, and you could really see that reflected in the book and the writing,
Yeah,
like what she gained from every incident that happened, and that was nice to see.
I know. I was also so mad at her so many times throughout this book where I'm like, girl, just stay. Just stay. It's going to be okay.
Like it's
It
gonna work
happened.
itself out, yes.
Yes. And then, yeah. And then she runs, which is what she knows how to do, how she knows how to survive. Um, and it's hard reading the book because it's hard to be patient with her process sometimes. I'm like, no, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
we know what's going on here. Let's just do it. And I feel like that happens in therapy sometimes too, where it's we can see the end result, we can see what needs to happen to get there, but we still have to have trial and error to be able to make it to that point where it becomes stable growth instead of like this far off dream of what could be.
Mhm.
Um,
And I think about her path and like how easily it could have been, like all those different hardships, how easily it could have been for most people to just be completely derailed into other negative things, like substance abuse, or just nowadays you worry about like trafficking, and which if this is like in the 90s, so it's, things are just a little bit different. But just think about like without the strength and her, I guess, resilience and stuff pushing through all these, like how easy it would have been for her to take a different path.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of our questions. starting out, um, let me see where we want to start. Oh, let's start a little bit more chronologically with the book. The difference, and I would like, okay, let's start a little more chronologically with the book. And I want us to examine the difference between the way Justin and April see the trip to Florida. And how they also see the way that the trip comes to an end. What are the differences that you see between Justin's perspective and April's perspective?
But to me, Justin was like trying to show his dad, like, I don't have to do what you want me to do, and I'm gonna do this instead, and being like a little bit rebellious, but knowing that like he had the comfort that there was always an out, and that this wasn't like he doesn't have to do this, and if things go wrong, it's just one phone call away, and that he knows his whole life is like he has a whole different path that he can still take. Well, there are different options. Whereas April, like this was her means of survival. This was her life. This was like how she gets by. And there's no other option for her. There's nobody for her to call. There's nobody to, I guess, just like release her of any of these hardships. So it's just, and then like how it ends, like they get to the point where he realizes, oh, this isn't somebody, this house that, somebody, or a family member. I think it was her uncle, she had said, or something like that. And, and he freaks out and gets mad and was like, you made me a thief. And the way he sees it versus her literally just surviving. And that's like what she does to get by. It was just really interesting to think about it that way.
Heather?
Yeah, so I think it was interesting to see the two different perspectives, because I completely agree with Stephanie as far as kind of like the rebellious state, or maybe like frame of thinking that Justin was in, like, oh, I'm gonna go do this thing and kind of do what I want, but then still having the safety net of his dad is just a phone call away, and his dad is still present in his life and can still help him. And then seeing this perspective of April, and almost like the accumulation of traumas that she's had, it like kind of pulled me into that. Those trauma patterns also kind of propelled her problem solving skills and thinking ahead, and that solution based thinking, whereas I think Justin was like, well, I have a safety net, so I can go out and do what I want, but like I can just call back home and figure it out that way. So it was interesting to see the two, almost like the executive functioning processes of that. So again, it was a difficult state for me to be in. I was like, oh, but it was neat to see the process of how they worked through that.
Yeah, like her trying to make the money and like doing what she needed to do, and he's out there just swimming and eating hot dogs, and I'm like, I felt angry during like that section of the book. I was like, Justin, like, come on, man.
So one, his privilege and lack of awareness that somebody else could be moving through life in a different way than him, and would even have to do ethically questionable things to be able to survive. Like that concept that that's how some people have to survive is wild to me and just makes me so angry at him. However, do you think that Justin had a right to be angry with April?
I do think, I guess, that the integrity of their, like, we'll say friendship, that honesty factor, I sit with him in that, as far as it does hurt or diminish maybe the relationship if they're not being honest with each other. I understand like her approach to get her needs met in that survival thinking and just like mode. So that was also like a difficult spot. I was just like, oh, like I wish I could be honest. And then there's like but she's surviving. And I think that does bring a different component of complexities within that. But I think honesty is the best policy in a sense. So it ended up kind of hurting or tarnishing the relationship just a little bit.
Stephanie, what's your perspective?
I think yeah, I could see where he had like a right to be mad. But she also had like the right to be mad whenever like he just assumed that he could pay for the hotel and they bought pay-per-view and they did all these things, and the way she handled that and using like what very little money she had left. So I guess I initially was mad. I was like, yeah, he does have the right to be mad. And then I thought about like other ways that like she could have handled things and how she didn't handle them. And I don't know. I guess I could see him having the right to be mad about that, the dishonesty. And
Yeah, you look pained saying that right now.
I think because I just think about him at the end of the book and I just
Yeah,
leaves a really bad taste in my mouth all around.
Yeah, I do. That question always comes to my mind of like, does he have a right to be mad at her? One, because I watch way too many Am I the Asshole podcasts, and that's just always on my mind of like, who's the asshole here? And I think the reality of it is that both of them had a right to feel angry with the other, to like, well, both of them had the right to feel angry with the other. April, to me, had the right to be mad at Justin too, because he was not making it an emotionally safe experience for her, because he wasn't understanding that she was completely on her own and had limited finances and didn't seem to care that she literally had to work just to make money for them to be able to continue, but then was still mad at her that she um, like finagled away for them to have a place to stay when he was saying that there's no other options, I can't go back. So I do feel like he put her in a really difficult situation emotionally to have said to him, hey, I don't have funds. We can either try to get into a house, it break into a house and squat there, or you can call your dad and we can go back. That's it. Those are the choices that we have. And I just can't imagine being in her position and truly being able to say that to him when he was already someone who was not understanding of her position. So I think it's complicated. He had a right to be mad, but he also put her in a really difficult position that I understand why she would have lied.
I did like watching, I think, sort of, and I say watching, like, I'm one of those, I'm a visual person. So when I'm reading books, I'm like, it's playing out in my head, but kind of that enactment in my own head of like the redemption process of like, I feel like she did try to turn it around and she did like pay for the hotel and things like that and like scrape money together to like make it work, even though maybe it wasn't like his perception of making it work. And it's hard because it's like that was another like character building moment for her in the sense of like she's building resilience, she's building more skills, not in like the easiest way, but the redemption of like I can turn this around. It doesn't have to be like I'll just continue digging myself maybe in the hole and like try to run out on the bill or something like that. So I thought that was nice to see kind of the almost and I go into these stages of like the forming what is it, the business phases of like forming, norming, storming, and performing, and she was kind of going through those phases but ending kind of making it work for her.
I also think that we get to see her learn a really important lesson there, which is don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, because she is putting herself into a position that she doesn't want to be in anymore. She used to kind of shake her ethics a little bit more and had moved away from that. And then she's put into a situation where she feels like she needs to do what he wants, and she doesn't feel like she has another choice. But in the end, realizing he was going to be a jerk about it anyways, that she should have just said no.
Yeah, when she
Uh,
felt like iffy about it in the beginning, like following that gut
Yeah.
instinct.
Yeah. So since we're on the topic of Justin, well, to recap a little bit, we know that from Florida, she goes to North Carolina, she meets Ethan and Robert, develops a relationship with Robert, and finds out that she's pregnant, thinking that the baby is Robert's, but then realizing after an ultrasound that it was from that one night that she slept with Justin on the beach. And then goes to try to find him and let him know. How did you feel during that process of realizing that it was Justin's child, and then her leaving North Carolina and going to tell him and not getting a very good response?
I was so sad for her because the courage it took for her to go to him, to even tell him, was probably just tremendous. And to be met with that type of rejection, that aggressive rejection, and not just for her, but for also like her son, right? It's not just her anymore, it's her and her son. And it was hard to swallow. I did not like that part. And I wanted to go through the book to Justin. I
Yeah,
was so mad.
yeah,
Yeah, I was also, I think, heartbroken for her to have to do that again, kind of this very significant time in her life, and still, kind of like sticking to like her character of like, I do want to do what is right and like let him know and tell him, and then being confronted with him kind of like at the door, and he's just like, no, like get away, like keeping her outside, trying to like keep it hush hush, just very dismissive. And it just showed more of his true character of just like the immaturity, and how she was, I think, more mature, even though like they all had their mistakes, or they both did. I felt for her, I hurt for her. Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to like flake Justin, like just go away,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
why?
yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of his selfish response, selfish judgmental response to her, it does make me think about um, the interactions with people in our lives as we're going through the post-traumatic growth process. So when people have seen us at a time when we were still healing, or when we were in the midst of our trauma, their beliefs about who we are and how we are can follow us for much longer than we have healed. And so, in my mind, whenever she goes to Justin, she is in such a better place. She's doing the right thing by going and telling him. Um, she's not in survival mode in the same way anymore, and has moved forward so much in her healing and accepting love, and like really accepting her talent with music in a different way. And then she is confronted by a person who, what's the right way to put this? She's confronted by a person who only sees her at her worst. Like that vision of how she was at her worst is how he's picturing her and talking about like, well, I don't know who you slept with. This could be anyone's anyone's baby. I know how y'all are on the road, and that you will sleep with someone just to have the bed to sleep in at night. So why would I ever believe that this was my child? Um, what do you think is important for people to know whenever they're in that part of the process and they're getting like they've done so much to heal, and then they're getting negative feedback from the people in their lives still, when like they haven't done anything wrong.
That one I think is so hard to deal with and manage. And again, I felt like she was like trying to do all this processing like alone. I think that where it kind of like hit me in the book, that it just really shows that people treat others where they are. So if we're able to like see and try to have that external like view of kind of like where they are, and it's like, okay, the expectation is they're that place in their life, and so they're treating me where they are. It doesn't necessarily say truly how they feel about me or what's really going on in my life, and maybe doesn't define me. They're just coming from their own maybe place of like hurt and turmoil and things like that. So kind of their collective perspective from where they are. But yeah, definitely difficult to see, to feel. Yeah, that was difficult.
Stephanie.
Yeah, that's hard because you're the only one who truly knows what you've been through, how far you've come, and kind of where you're at. Not everybody sees that, and not everybody takes the opportunity to see that. They just kind of like what Heather said, they see you where you're at, and that's difficult to remind yourself because it's hard to see yourself in that lens as well in the moment. And she's also doing this like after something very significant in her life has happened. So she's processing so much at one time. But yeah, that's a difficult journey.
Yeah. You know, I think it's the idea that or it's us having to remember in those moments where we're growing, but other people don't see we're growing, that their responses can hurt really deeply. And we can remember that their responses are not necessarily about us, that they're about where they are in their lives, that they're about maybe an older version of us that this person hasn't dealt with or hasn't been able to deal with, or just them not being able to see anyone's perspective, which I think is what's happening in the case of Justin, that he can't see anyone's perspective outside of his own.
And it would do him so much good to be able to open that realm of like what else is going on besides just what is in front of Justin or what Justin's dealing with.
Yeah, but that is where, like, because I think about that too of, come on, Justin, like, get it together. But for April, it's about, okay, I can't do anything about Justin's response to this. I have to know who I am, what I'm capable of, and where I'm at with my healing, and take the next step forward instead of um, continuing to allow those kinds of experiences to set me back, to re-traumatize me. I can move forward instead of going back.
And she doesn't even, I think it shows a lot of growth at the very end of the book when she doesn't even take it off the table that someday maybe Justin can be involved and maybe I can seek him out again. Like
Yeah.
still through all of that, like she
Mhm.
shows so much growth in that moment, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. The other really significant thing that happens in the second half of the book is April's dad dying. What kind of impact do you think that that had on April?
Oh, such a loaded question. And I know that wasn't meant that way, but there's just so many things with
Oh,
that.
I always need to have loaded questions.
There's so many things that come to my mind. It's just like when she didn't make it there and he had passed, I felt so sad for her. She was trying to get there, it was just difficult. It wasn't something easy. She could just get on a plane and go and, um, it's just hard. I don't know. It just, the relationship with her dad was just difficult. It was hard. can imagine the passing of him and what the impact that has. And just it's significant. I'm trying to put it into words, like all of it.
Yeah, my first thought is just like flooding. Like my brain's flooding right now. And I'm
Yeah.
sure when she was receiving that news and she did try so hard to get there and all the mileage, all the time on the road and like being pregnant and that pressure of just like trying to hurry and get there. And then ending up like it was kind of too late. I did like that Margot was able to kind of take care of her within that like moment of like it's okay, like girly, and like you did your best, like you tried to get here. I think the impact of that will kind of be a forever thing of like little bits of processing throughout that time period after he had passed. And I think in this sense too, I think reading that out, she and this is me maybe making these implications of like she's going to have to choose her own kind of closure within this because I feel like that's so difficult and she didn't get to physically create that closure with him, and they're a very difficult relationship, so I think she's going to have to kind of make peace and choose her own closure in that and allow the processing of that to continue on.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that she was choosing to go home without any hesitation, without like having to see the people and having to visit the places and running into
Yeah.
people while she's pregnant and like not, she's just gonna go. She was just gonna go and be there for him, despite how he treated her and the things they've been through.
I think a complication of that people experience when they have had childhood trauma, and especially whenever from that trauma they've had to go no contact with their families, is one, when somebody goes no contact, then they can have a sense of grief for a long time while they're in that phase of, I'm grieving a person who is still alive. And then when that person dies, there's a finality to that grief process. But I think for April, she also maybe still had a sense of hope that she would get to have that like hopeful moment at the end of showing her dad love and maybe being able to get some level of love from her dad. But to me, it also marks this point in her life where she is able to let go of her family of origin more and accept the people in her life who have actually been there for her, instead of wanting and striving for and hoping for this love from her family of origin. She opened herself and allowed herself to accept love and accept that she like deserved that love from Margot, from her friend from Ithaca. What was her name again?
Carly?
Carly. From Margot, from Carly, from Ethan, and even in the hospital after she gives birth, the like flowers and presents that she receives from the people that she's met all along the way in her music touring. And being able to realize, yes, I never got to have closure with my dad. I never really felt loved by my parents, but that doesn't mean that I'm undeserving of love. That there are people that are healthier in this life that can show me what support and familial relationships are supposed to look like.
Yeah, and I think at one point in the book, she just flat out was like, why don't I matter to anybody? And we get to see at the end of the book, like, she matters to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That was so heartwarming.
Yeah, and kind of when you were kind of speaking on that piece, Kim, I definitely thought of like the how she was like, striving and chasing after this meaning for the family of origin and just being able to matter and have value. She was like chasing after that. And then having this moment where he is physically gone now, where she I think still in a sense, I guess, was processing experience and building in her own kind of self. Um, but the like physical ending of something, but also like the physical, emotional, and mental beginning of something new, of that like acceptance and allowing people in. And I guess just like really acknowledging like there are people that do care about me and do see my value and my self-worth. And maybe I was chasing something maybe that did matter at that time, like my father and my family of origin, but I also have this other avenue of self-acceptance, love, family support. So I thought that's where my thought was going to, as you mentioned, kind of the end of that something physical, but then also like this beginning of so many new relationships.
At the end of the book, who would you say is April's family? Who's included in that?
Ethan for sure. Margot, Carly. Those
And
three.
potentially, I guess, was it Robert, I guess, as far as like Ethan was like kind of explaining to Robert maybe like the situation like after the hospital, I think. You'll correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
I don't.
I think that
Or was it?
Robert was like moving on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and she felt happy about that. But Ethan had moved from North Carolina to Ithaca,
Yes.
and was thriving there. Just like she had talked about that it was this amazing place, and it ended up really being an amazing place for him too.
Mhm. Ethan
I
like wasn't.
go ahead, Stephanie.
Oh, sorry. I don't. Sorry, there was a lag. Ethan had like a smaller part in the book, but his impact was huge,
Mhm.
and I loved that.
Yeah. What do you think his impact on April was?
I think it was significant. She was able to truly unburden herself, which she had not been able to do, in the way that had to have made her feel like
Mhm.
just amazing. And then also it gave her a chance to show up for somebody else too. So like making the anti-anniversary dinner, and when she walked in whenever the domestic violence situation was going on, and it gave her a chance to like show up for somebody else and like show that side of her and grow from that too. And I loved seeing that.
And I think Ethan offered her this sense of like authentic love and patience with somebody that like you do show love for, like despite maybe the turmoil that the relationship and like leaving and things like that, and maybe a little bit of like her kind of like pushing away, he still sought after like their relationship and taking care of their relationship. So I think she had this like realization of like, oh, maybe despite me leaving and some things happening, I'm still valued, I'm still loved, there's still worth within the relationship. I don't just have to like cut and run and then like ghost them in a sense. So I love that he kind of went after her and continued that relationship and showing her that like she is worth it and it is okay. And there can be maybe some not so great things happen in a relationship, but if both parties are willing to work and communicate about it, um there can be the sustainability of the relationship. So watching that evolve was like really nice and really exciting.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, last question. What what is your biggest takeaway from the book?
Oh, I think
It's
Yeah,
a
that was
big
hard.
question. Mhm.
um,
So many things are popping up in
yeah.
my head. I think one is just being that we can offer ourselves like love, acceptance, and patience even if others maybe don't, or maybe they're not there yet, we can still have grace for ourselves as we're
Mhm.
figuring it out. Even if somebody else's perception is like, oh, you should have it figured out right now. Like, what are you doing? But everybody's road is different in navigating life and its journey. So I think that was one of the bigger lessons for me.
Yeah, I think allowing yourself to the chosen family aspect. And I think for me personally, there's people that I am like immediate family members that I've been no contact with for a long time. But then there's chosen people along the way who show up and I show up for them. So I think the aspect of like allowing yourself to feel at home with who's right for you is big for me. And then just like your past doesn't indicate anything of what you can become and what you can get through. I'm just learning to like allow yourself the patience and the grace to get through hard things.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my mentors used to always give the quote of, you can have great tragedy in your life and still have a great life.
Yeah.
And that's certainly one of the things that I take away from this book. I also think that, similar or jumping off of what you said, Stephanie, we always have the ability to pivot. And if we don't like what our life looks like, we can do something about that to be able to try something new. And whether that's moving to a new place, as much as she drove me crazy, just picking up and running away, but we can change careers, we can change jobs, we can leave toxic relationships. We can seek out new connections and new friendships, and take the time to really get to know who we are, um, because the life that other people think we should have is not always the life that is the best for us, is not always our authentic life. And she got to get to that place where she has a non-traditional family, and that is perfect for her, where she feels supported and loved, and where her child is supported and loved. Um, and it doesn't have to be anyone actually related to her to make that happen.
Yeah. We're all deserving of that happy ending, that happy place.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will close out book club for this novel. We certainly want to be able to do this again, so be on the lookout for more information about the next book in the next few months, and we will see you back then.